doctors and nurses working in the most extreme conditions are true heroes. They deserve. It's 2.5 months since Prime Minister Netanyahu restarted offensive operations. The IDF has driven Palestinians out of 86% of Gaza, leaving around 2 million people trapped in an area scarcely over 20 square miles. Whatever this Israeli government might claim, repeated displacement of so many civilians is not keeping them safe. In fact, it's quite the reverse. The new Israeli aid system is inhumane, it's dangerous, and it deprives Gazans of human dignity. It contradicts long-established humanitarian principles. It creates disorder Hamas is now exploiting, with distribution points reduced from 400 to just 4. It forces desperate civilians, children among them, to scramble unsafely for the essentials of life. It's a grotesque spectacle, wrecking a terrible human cost. Almost 1,000 civilians have been killed since May, seeking aid, including 100, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this weekend alone. What can I say to honourable friend? But I firmly believe the Israeli government's action are doing untold damage to Israel's standing in the world and undermining Israel's long-term security. Netanyahu should listen to the Israeli people, 82% of whom desperately want a ceasefire, and to the hostage families, because they know it offers the best chance to bring their loved ones home. Those hostages may be hidden in cramped tunnels under the ruins of Gaza, but we will not forget them or Hamas's despicable actions, and we will continue to demand their unconditional release.
Secretary, to enforce further sanctions, and can he lay out?
Today I can confirm we are enhancing our support, providing £7 million to strengthen the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian governance, implementing the agreement signed by myself and PM Mustafa earlier this year, and we're delivering the reform plans that President Abbas has set out. I can also confirm that we're providing £20 million worth to support UNRWA's many services for Palestinian refugees.
Over the weekend in Gaza, we saw yet more mass shootings and killings of people seeking UN aid for their families, an atrocious and inhumane act which I utterly condemn. We need an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate release of all hostages, and unimpeded humanitarian access as a first step to achieve the two-state solution.
Share with you, which I was just given, but the font is small, so I need my glasses. The Secretary General is appalled by the accelerating breakdown of humanitarian conditions in Gaza, where the last lifelines keeping people alive are collapsing. He deplores the growing reports of children and adults suffering from malnutrition. The Secretary General strongly condemns the ongoing violence, including the shooting, the killing, and the injuring of people attempting to get food for their families. Civilians must be protected, civilians must be respected, and they must never, ever be targeted. The population in Gaza remains gravely undersupplied with the basic necessities of life. Israel has the obligation to allow and facilitate by all means at its disposal the humanitarian relief provided by the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations. The Secretary General notes that the intensification of hostilities in recent days comes as the humanitarian system is being impeded, undermined, and endangered. A new evacuation order in parts of Deir al-Balah, homes for tens of thousands, pushes people into more desperate conditions and further displacement, and restricts our ability to deliver life-saving aid. As I mentioned, UN staff is remaining in Deir al-Balah, and 2 UN guest houses have been impacted, despite the parties having been informed of the location of UN premises, which, as you well know, are inviolable. These locations, as with all civilian sites, must be protected regardless of evacuation orders. The Secretary General reiterates his urgent call for the protection of civilians, including humanitarian personnel, and the provision of essential resources to ensure their survival. He once again calls on the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. We stand ready to significantly scale up our humanitarian operations. The time for a ceasefire is now.
Je m'associe pleinement à leur plaidoyer et joins ma voix à tous ceux qui dénoncent les graves dérives humanitaires à Gaza, où des innocents meurent de faim et tombent sous les bombes, étouffés dans leur enclave. La situation actuelle n'a que trop duré. Elle est une honte pour l'humanité tout entière. Nous soutenons l'appel du secrétaire général des Nations Unies à mettre fin immédiatement à cette crise insoutenable.
In Gaza, people no longer queue for aid. They rush at every turn of a flour truck's wheel. And this week, for some Gazans, that gamble ended in death. Israeli forces opened fire on desperate crowds seeking food. 93 people were killed in the gunfire. The Israeli army says it was responding to a threat, but survivors recall a hellish scene. Old men shot off bicycles, children buried under chaos, women screaming over the fallen.
They were hiding behind high barriers. We couldn't see them, but they suddenly emerged and started shooting and shelling us. Women and children were lying dead on the ground. It felt like doomsday. Everyone was trying to save themselves. Children and women were torn apart, still lying there in large numbers.
I saw people dying, lying motionless on the ground. There were no ambulances and no one could help. The shelling was random from tanks, warships, and snipers. Gunfire was coming from all directions.
Since October 2023, Gaza has been a theater of devastation. At least 19 people died of hunger on a single day this week. Aid workers report a famine-like situation. Gaza's Ministry of Health warns that hundreds more will die soon. And yet, aid trucks remain stalled just kilometers away. Israel claims security concerns. The UN calls it man-made famine. And stuck in the middle are Gazans, who die just trying to get some aid. So what is Israel's goal in the Strip? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it is ending the Hamas. But to his domestic critics, he is a political survivor using war to cling to power. Many believe he has become a man increasingly difficult to interpret and even harder to control. At the White House, whispers have turned into frustration. Reports say that one White House official said that Bibi is acting like a madman. Another compared him to a child who just won't behave. Even Donald Trump has reportedly lost his patience. His aides are said to be exasperated by Netanyahu's unpredictability, his readiness to bomb first and justify later. The final straw for many came this week when Israeli strikes hit Gaza's only Catholic church. The strikes killed 3 people. Donald Trump ended up calling Netanyahu reportedly frustrated. Even the Vatican has entered the fray. After the church strike, 2 patriarchs from the Catholic and Greek Orthodox churches entered Gaza. They stood in the ruins of the church. The Pope himself has not only condemned the barbarity of the war, he also dialed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas for the first time since his papacy began. This act, sadly, adds to the ongoing military attacks against the civilian population and places of worship in Gaza. Once again, I call for an immediate end to the barbarity of war. So is this a tipping point in the war? Ceasefire talks remain stalled. The Israeli government seems in no mood to stop. And Netanyahu, increasingly boxed in by his legal troubles and political enemies, has little incentive to de-escalate. If anything, he appears to be gambling, that the world will huff and puff but ultimately let him proceed. So far, that bet has paid off. But as aid seekers die in queues and churches get bombed, that bet has become riskier. With the war showing no sign of ending soon, millions of Gazans remain caught in between, fighting a daily battle against hunger, displacement, and death.